It feels a little odd to call anything a Picasso-style portrait because Picasso was known to have worked in a number of different styles in different periods of his life. But we're going to focus on some of the elements of the style that most commonly are associated with Picasso, particularly in his portraiture. It must have been an odd thing to sit down for a portrait to be painted by Picasso. On the one hand, I'm sure people were excited to have their portrait painted by such a famous and great artist. On the other hand, it had to be a little bit of a buzzkill to realize he was going to make you look so ugly. Picasso is known for painting portraits that looked sort of like this. A little bit surreal, a little bit abstract, somewhat recognizable as a person, but not like any person that we've seen walking around, unless they've been in some sort of horrific accident or something. Anyways, one of the first characteristics that jumps out to a lot of my students is the mixed perspectives. Picasso often showed sort of one eye facing forward, one eye in profile, a nose going off in a different direction. Picasso was known to try to portray his subject from multiple perspectives or multiple viewpoints, all mashed together in one composition. That's probably the largest contributor to the overall odd aesthetic. Another characteristic of his style is the simplified shapes to represent more complex forms. Picasso was largely influenced by African artists and the African style of abstraction, which had simple shapes like ovals to represent features like the eyes, or a triangle to represent the nose. Today we're going to make a Picasso-style relief sculpture using a slab of clay. The learning targets for the project are going to be 1. I can use simple shapes to represent features in an abstract portrait. 2. I can show multiple perspectives in one unified composition. And 3. I can use textures to create contrast in my design. First thing I'm going to do is roll out a slab of clay. I always roll my clay top to bottom and left to right. I want to make a slab that's about as thick as my finger, or about half an inch thick. It can be a little bit thicker, a little bit thinner, but you don't want it to be paper thin or it can crack and break too easily. The next thing I'm going to do is use my needle tool to cut out the overall shape for my face. Basically an oval will do. Peel off the clay around that. That scrap clay is what you're going to use to make the various features. I like to start off by sort of dividing up the face, adding a nose and a mouth. I'm going to just lightly etch where I want my nose to go and where that divided line is going to go. I want to be careful not to cut through the clay. I'm just sort of sketching out my design. Then I'm going to wet, scratch, and attach the pieces. The water makes the clay soft and sticky. Scratching creates loose edges that get tangled together, kind of like Velcro. And finally, I'm going to press the pieces together and smooth over the cracks to make sure that everything is well attached and well bonded. It's really important to try to get everything unified, so I usually try to push clay from one piece onto the other. I always try to remember slip, scratch, smooth. Wet it, scratch it, smooth over the cracks. I say that about 1,000,000 times, and I always get some pieces that just fall apart as the clay dries out because the pieces are not well attached. Make sure you slip, scratch, and smooth. Wet it, scratch it, smooth over the cracks. Make sure everything is well attached, well unified so it doesn't fall apart. The next thing I'm going to do is start making various features. In Picasso's style, you're always using simplified shapes to represent the features, so I just usually roll a ball of clay, press it flat, and make an oval for the eye, other little balls of clay to make other features. And as I attach that, I usually like to add further embellishment, so I make a little ball of clay to put on top of there to make a little circle. And then I'll usually poke in a pupil on the eye. I found that's a little detail that can make a big difference, is adding that pupil inside the eye. The next thing I'm going to do is just look around and add more features. To get that mixed up Picasso sort of feel, I'm going to add a second mouth over here. So I just rolled a ball of clay, pressed it flat, so it becomes that oval shape. And I'm going to sort of press in to make a division between the top and bottom lip. And then Maybe I'll make a little tongue sticking out. Again, anytime I'm making pieces, I want to slip, scratch, and smooth, wet it, scratch it, smooth over the cracks. I want to make sure everything's nicely attached, and use just simple shapes to represent these features in Picasso style. Beyond just the standard eyes, nose, mouth, I can think about adding other features. I can add ears, I can add hair, I could add accessories like put a bow on its head or give it a hat on its head. I could give it all sorts of things. In my classroom, I often have students who don't want to make a human face, they want to make an animal face. If you want to make a Picasso style puppy, go for it. If you want to make a Picasso penguin, or any other sort of creature that you would like, the main focus is on creating a Picasso style portrait that's abstracted by using simple shapes to represent the features, showing mixed perspectives or different viewpoints of that subject mixed together on one composition. And the final sort of objective or learning target I have for my students on this has to do with the texture. I always want to see purposeful textures on the design. I can't stand seeing clay projects that are left with crumbly bits and cracks all over the place. Paying attention to the texture and smoothing over the cracks doesn't just make your sculpture look better, it also makes it stronger. It gets the clay to be a little bit more unified. So I really emphasize the importance of paying attention to texture on a clay project. Make sure that pieces are well designed. I always start by smoothing over the cracks and smoothing over the pieces, and then I start adding tools to add textured designs. So after I add the hair, I might use a tool, could use my needle tool, I could use just a pencil or some other tool to etch lines in to create the texture, just stripes going the direction the hair might be going. Or sometimes I'll add less realistic textures. I might decide that I want part of my face to have polka dots and press in a marker cap to get that polka dot texture on there. I could decide that I want the other side of it to be striped or something else to create contrast. I might put spirals on there just to create a little bit of contrast and make the different features stand out. So maybe I'll make some spirals in the ears, and maybe I'll make curved stripes on the other side of the face. Just adding different textures on different parts of my design creates contrast or shows a difference and makes those different features stand out. One thing I don't demonstrate in this video, but I do often recommend with slab pieces, is poking a hole in the top or carving a notch out of the back so it can hang on a hook or a nail and display on a wall.